Hello, welcome to the third episode in Stories from Strathmore with me, Jimmy Black. Tonight we're back in Coupar Angus and we're going to take a wander with local historian Joe Richards through the past. We'll be hearing how Coupar Angus was an essential supplier to the world of high fashion, the gory tale of a bearded Valewoman and the Blairgowrie Express, and Joe will tell us about a couple of the town's more famous residents. Now, I like Coupar Angus. I was brought up there, and I never thought of it as anything else but an attractive, well-kept, busy, bustling town at the centre of things, until, that is, I left to work in Edinburgh and Dundee. In Edinburgh, everyone thought it was in Fife, and in Dundee, people had the cheek to refer to our ancient borough as being in the sticks. So I thought I'd turn devil's advocate and see if Joe Richards would defend his hometown. Why on earth are you interested in a town which seems to be a sleepy place? It's a kind of dormitory for commuters to Perth and Dundee. Nobody ever really goes there unless they have to, and if you blink you miss it on the road to Aberdeen. What's so interesting about it?
Well, Jimmy, I see you're running the place down, and you're not the first person to do so. In fact, I've got an old document in my hand here that was written 100 years ago, and the place is being described as time-worn, decayed and stagnant. However, I think that's an interesting statement, and there's a lot to say about Coupar Angus. I can tell you that it's a happy place with a good community spirit, and I've seen people coming here and not wanting to leave. I've seen holidaymakers come here and reside in the town and become part of the community. People here belong to one another. There is a feeling of cohesiveness in the town that I feel doesn't exist in the big cities, and we still have that.
Has it got a long history, the town?
Well, yes, it does. It's surprisingly, the history is still being found out, and I've just recently read an official report from the archaeologists who conducted a dig in the centre of the town on Beach Hill, and they unearthed a number of early graves dating from the Bronze Age time, and there were bones and some arrowheads found in this site. So, in fact, we previously thought the Romans were the first people to inhabit this area, but we can see that there were early Scots even before that.
Perhaps Coupar Angus was at its wealthiest and most powerful in the days of the Cistercian Abbey, just where the Presbyterian church is today in the Dundee Road. Its empire stretched far beyond Strathmore, and its abbots were influential in the court of the Scots kings.
The abbey was founded in 1164 during the reign of King Malcolm, and even today in the town you can see scraps of the abbey. The biggest remains lie next to the churchyard, and it's an archway which is reputedly the only remains left of the porter's lodge. The townspeople used the abbey ruin as a quarry to build their cottages, and that's why there's very little to be seen now today.
People in Coupar Angus make their living these days from agriculture, working in the chicken factory, making honey or running shops, to name just some of the various occupations in the town. But the industries in Coupar have changed a lot in the last century. By the way, if you hear a strange shaking noise in the background, don't worry, it's just the Richards family dog.
Well, if we look to about 100 years ago, there was quite a lot of industry in the town. There were 3 linen works, there was a very large tannery, there was a farina works, that's potato flour, there was a brewery, and there was a steam sawmill. So there's a lot going on in the town 100 years ago. Unfortunately, of all these industries, there's really only the sawmill left with us today. But other industries have come in to take over.
Was there any kind of unusual industries in Coupar Angus?
Yes, there was a silver fox fur farm here in Coupar Angus in the 1920s. This was the height of high fashion for ladies to have a fox fur draped over their shoulders. And I'm sure that animal rights people would have been up in arms. But in the 1920s, this was the in thing. And every respectable lady would have one of these. And you still see them at the jumble sales these days. And they looked very realistic. They had glass eyes and very lovely fur. And there was a large factory, or farm rather, just across the road from where we're sitting just now. There were hundreds of foxes, and they were raised up in cages. Very wild animals. They couldn't be tamed at all. The original stock was imported from Canada, and old Mr. Rood would breed these foxes up here, and they would yelp all night and keep the locals awake. And so there was a lot of people in the town who were not completely happy with this industry. However, it went with fashion, and probably only lasted for about 25 years. But it was big in its day, with many hundreds of foxes and hundreds of cages.
Mm-hmm. Now, another big industry in Coupar Angus was the railway. It was a fairly important railway terminal for potatoes and coal and things, wasn't it?
We could hop on the train up to Aberdeen, up to Blairgowrie, Perth. In fact, my mother used to go to school on the train to Perth every day. So we were at the centre of a very extensive rail network.
There's rather a gory story about what happened to one railwayman in
Oh yes, that's right. Well, every level crossing had to have a keeper's cottage by it, and he would live there and open and close the gates when required. Well, this chap, we've got a picture of him. He's a long grey beard in late Victorian days, and one day he had a bit too much to drink and was walking along the railway line foolishly when the Blairgowrie Express ploughed into him. And unfortunately, my grandmother related the story to me, how they had to fish him out of the burn in about 6 different pieces, and that was what happened to the railwayman, so I'm afraid he had a rather gory end.
Some famous people have lived in Coupar Angus. For example, the footballer Alan Gilzean, Eve Graham of the New Seekers, remember them, and General Douglas Wimberley, one of the chief strategists at the Battle of El Alamein under Montgomery. Joe told me about 2 other illustrious residents, one from the present, one from the past.
Well, we have a few characters. We've had some people on the telly. Bill Abernethy is our well-known personality. He's our full-time pearl fisher, and he fishes the freshwater mussel, and he's owns the famous Abernethy pearl, which is the biggest one in the country. And in fact, the rivers have been fished since Roman times for pearls. If I go back to the 17th century, I can tell you of the last abbot of Coupar Angus. He was a bit of a rogue, and as you could imagine, abbots were supposed to be unmarried and abstemious, and in fact he had 4 illegitimate children, and at the dissolution of the abbeys, he in fact decided to gift the grounds of the abbey to his 4 children, and the 4 great estates of Arthurstone, Bokershow, Cronin and Keithick were given to his sons, and they are still estates in their own right to this day. So he was a man of great influence in his time.
Well, that's where we say thanks to Joe Richards for taking us on a historical tour of Coupar Angus. Next week I'll be finding out why every year, round about Easter, strange-looking horses made of gingerbread appear in the town's Athol bakery. That'll be our last stop in Coupar for a while. I'll be off to Currymuir to find out why no one ever sings a song about a certain dance there in polite company. Cheerio!